We're pleased today to be kicking off this new series with our important partner and friend, Thomas Bruns, who's the Regional Senior Commercial Officer for the Gulf at the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi. Thomas and his team are a fantastic resource and important partner for U.S. companies looking to expand their business in the UAE and the wider Gulf region. Today, Thomas and his full team, which are arrayed before you on the screen, pretty overwhelming. I want some of those team members on my side to help David and I and the rest of our team. So just be careful, Thomas. Just joking. We'll have a question and answer session with Thomas and his team after they're finished with their brief presentations and their opening remarks to provide perspectives on projects, campaigns, and issues where they can be helpful. I strongly encourage all attendees to utilize the Q&A function to ask questions. I would also like to note that this webinar will be recorded and shared publicly, and we are operating under Chatham House rules in any event. Before turning over the floor to Thomas, I just want to sincerely thank everyone for joining us today. I am pleased to see that we have over 120 of the 200 members that registered for the call. I'm sure more will be joining as the call goes on. And I'm also pleased to see representatives from no less than 14 states in the United States in attendance. And I always like to call out the names of the states that support these webinars because it's very, very important to the broader connectivity between our two countries. We have representatives from Alabama, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, my great state of Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Utah. That's quite a lineup for a Wednesday morning after Labor Day here in the United States and from across the United States. So thank you. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of state-level engagement to the work that we do in further growing the bilateral relationship. With that, and without further ado, Thomas, allow me to turn it over to you and your colleagues. And again, thank you so much for all that you do to support American business and the partnership and cooperation with our Emirati colleagues.
Thank you very much, Danny, for those kind words and for this great opportunity to speak to you today. It was terrific listening to you rattle off all the different states and the companies that are on the call. This is just a great opportunity for us to talk a little bit about what we do and an opportunity to connect. So first of all, let me just provide a brief synopsis of our office and the different team members to give you a better idea of how we can support you. So on the call, you'll be introduced to officers and specialists, commercial specialists throughout the UAE that cover different sectors to support U.S. companies. And the mission of this team is to help companies find buyers and partners in the UAE, to advocate for U.S. interests for companies that are already here, and to promote inward investment into the United States for UAE entities that are looking to invest and create jobs in the U.S. We're also very focused on simply creating more partnerships between U.S. and UAE firms and growing the pie for both the countries, as we see it's in both our interests to do so. In addition to the International Trade Administration, that is to say the team that does the export promotion work, we also have from our U.S. Patent and Trade Office an attaché that'll be introduced later that deals specifically with intellectual property, and somebody who works in the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security, who will introduce himself, dealing with export controls. So within the entire region, we cover all these different areas and companies have access to these resources. And this is a great opportunity for you to take advantage of it. Before we go introductions, I wanted to just briefly give you some highlights on the things that we've been focused on recently. COVID-19 has definitely changed the way we do business. This call is just an example of that. We are working virtually with most of our clients. But what's been interesting is it has been an uptick in the number of services that are requested from our colleagues in the United States and U.S. export assistance centers. people are very interested in this market and the region in general, and we are very much able to make those connections virtually. The UAE has dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic very forcefully, and while cases there have been a bit of an uptick recently, if you look at the month of August, there was a steady decline, and slowly but surely the economy is opening up both in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. In terms of sort of larger strategic work, it's been a very historic time in the UAE. You have, I'm sure, seen in the press the historic Abraham Accord between the UAE and Israel. I had the honor and privilege of being a U.S. observer on one of the working groups on investment and business cooperation. And it's terrific to see that we now have firms in Israel and the UAE looking to partner and work together. And we're already hearing of other stories of potential partnerships, and recent news of Kosovo and Serbia also normalizing ties with Israel is very positive and encouraging. In addition to the Abraham Accords, over the last 6-7 months, we've, thanks to the great leadership of our new ambassador, John Rakolta from the great state of Michigan, we are looking to take the dialogue between the UAE and the U.S. to the next level and create a strategic dialogue where we can talk about larger issues about expanding trade and investment between the two countries. This is still something that's in the works. Danny, in fact, and the Business Council, as well as other partners, are helping to define what potential outcomes could come from a new strategic dialogue between our two countries. But it's what I'd like to just impart is it's very encouraging to see that the leadership on both sides is looking for new ways for us to work together, and that will only be, I think, beneficial to U.S. companies that are looking to do business in this market. Just to close, a couple of notes on activities that Danny mentioned that I want to highlight. First of all, Discover America, which is a campaign for those of you that are that are working in the UAE already, that we do every year to highlight the strong relationships between U.S. and UAE companies and entities. We're doing it again this year, but we're going to do it virtually. And we'll start with a webinar on Expo 2020 that was postponed a year, and it will start in October 2021 on September 14th. So next week. And this will be an opportunity for companies on the line to hear everything about Expo and how it can be a business platform for U.S. companies looking to do business in the Middle East. That will be followed by a series of 4 different webinars on key sectors such as energy, information and communication technology, healthcare, and aerospace throughout the fall and the beginning of the spring. A couple of other events and activities that I want to highlight is we have a large event that we do every year in the United States called Discover Global Markets, which this year will be on advanced manufacturing. And one of my colleagues will talk a little bit further about that. That'll be at the beginning of the month. And then in the beginning of the spring, in March, we'll also do a roadshow on infrastructure to highlight the expertise of U.S. companies in key sectors such as design and construction, energy, and water. I'll stop there and looking forward to take questions. And I have the honor now to pass the floor over to our new Deputy Senior Commercial Officer, Eric Kish, who just arrived and has hit the ground running. Eric, over to you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I'm Eric, the new deputy here. It's great to join Thomas and the team of experts and dedicated specialists that we have here in the UAE, who I'll introduce shortly. Just to recap the 4 pillars of how we're helping U.S. companies and how we want to help you. We help with export promotion. So we really hope you can think of us as a marketing partner. And we're happy to learn about your needs and discuss how we can help you expand your business in the UAE and the Gulf. We also help with commercial advocacy to level the playing field on public sector tenders, whether it's through directly from the government or if the government has a stake. The third pillar is commercial diplomacy to help with market access and trade barrier issues. So we're happy to hear when you run into roadblocks, what those are and how we might be able to help you with those. And the fourth part is Select USA to attract foreign direct investment into the United States. We do help U.S. companies with due diligence, and lately we've been fielding a lot of inquiries about different scams and things of that nature here, so we help companies with things like that as well. The Discover Global Markets event is a big showcase flagship event that Commerce does every year, October 7th to 9th this year. Intelligent manufacturing is a topic, but actually it's a broad scope event covering transportation and automotive, as well as aerospace and energy storage. So it's pretty wide scope, and thank you, Danny and David, for sharing some information on that later. So now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our team of experts and specialists. And our colleagues are really the backbone and the foundation of our organization and the institutional memory, who is here in Abu Dhabi and Dubai long-term and can help you across all different industry sectors. So with that, first, I'll turn it over to Christelle.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Reza, and I'm a commercial specialist at the U.S. Consulate General, Dubai. I cover the energy, water, environmental, and agriculture technologies and standards sectors in the UAE. As already Thomas mentioned, an upcoming project that I'm working on is an energy webinar in October, focusing on the oil and gas sector as part of our Discover America yearly campaign. We could share with you further details later on. I would also like to flag Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition and Conference, ADIPEC, which is this year due to the pandemic. It's virtual. This trade show is one of the Middle East's most important energy trade show and one of the largest energy shows globally. So US firms interested in this sector should consider attending this annual trade show. So as Eric mentioned, we are here to assist and support you in the UAE market. And at the end, I would like to thank the US-UAE Business Council for this opportunity. Thank you. Thanks, Eric, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, George, over to you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm George Masiha. I have been with the office for a little bit over 9 years. I handled many sectors over the past 4 years. I've been focusing on all the funny sectors with nice toys like defense, safety and security, space. And also I coordinate two of the key activities Eric explained briefly about, which are advocacy and Select USA for inward investments into the US. As Christelle highlighted the webinar on energy, my colleague Ashok and myself will be working on a webinar about space and aviation as key industries and areas of ambition for the UAE and Emiratis beginning of March, and we look forward to hosting most of you to the webinar. The last event, we look forward to welcoming you to Abu Dhabi beginning of, during the second week, of February for IDEX, which we hope that will be happening physically as another key event for the defense industry for the entire region. We look forward to meeting you in person and welcoming you at the US-UAE annual reception and interact with you to offer means of support and services from the US Department of Commerce. Thank you so much. Eric, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, Vandana, over to you.
Thanks, Eric. Hello, everyone. So my name is Vandana Nair. I'm based out of the US Commercial Service at the US Consulate in Dubai, and I handle sectors including healthcare and processed foods. I also work on IPR, which is one of the major trade barriers in the UAE, with Peter Meherwari, who is a US PTO commercial attaché in the UAE. So I'll talk briefly about healthcare sector. So UAE has a very strong reputation when it comes to healthcare, and they are very well positioned regionally. So the sector is very growing rapidly. And as my colleagues Crystal and George mentioned, we are also planning to have a webinar on healthcare, focusing mainly on healthcare opportunities for US companies here as a part of our Discover America campaign, which is tentatively scheduled in January 2021. So we look forward to having most of you to join those webinars. And as Crystal and my colleagues said, we are here to help you with your inquiries, and we are more than happy to help you with your plans in the UAE. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashok, over to you.
Good morning, everyone in the US. Good afternoon to our colleagues in the UAE. I'm glad to see all of you virtually. My name is Ashok Ghosh. I'm the commercial specialist based in the Dubai office. I'm the transportation lead covering aviation, automotive, and marine sectors. A couple of very important shows which takes place in the region in Dubai are Dubai Air Show, which happens every 2 years, Dubai Motor Show every 2 years, and Dubai Boat Show, International Boat Show every year. Apart from that, we have automotive aftermarket shows called Automechanica. We have SEMA, which is pretty expanding in the region. And any questions and all, I'm happy to answer any questions you have after the session. Glad to meet all of you. Over to you, Eric. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashok. Okay, Maya, over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning, everyone. And thank you, Danya and David, for this opportunity. It's so great to see you again. So I'm commercial specialist. I'm based in Abu Dhabi, and I cover all the services sector, which include education, franchising, financial services, and travel and tourism. I also handle the business service provider program. And I look forward to supporting you here in the UAE market if you happen to work in any of those sectors. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you. Becky, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Nanity. I am a commercial assistant at the embassy in Abu Dhabi, and I cover the information, communication, and telecom sector. The key areas of opportunities for US companies are innovative technologies in artificial intelligence, autonomous solutions, 5G, and e-commerce. A major trade show in the UAE focused on ICT is GITEX, that is scheduled to take place in Dubai in December this year. Hopefully, it will be in person and not a virtual event. As part of our Discover America program that my colleagues mentioned earlier, I'm working on a webinar scheduled tentatively for November with a focus on the ICT sector in the UAE. We will be happy to share more information on this event in the coming weeks. Also, as part of my duties, I support Thomas in scheduling and managing his meetings and support the team with other administrative tasks as well. I would like to end by thanking the US-UAE Business Council, Danny and David, for organizing this webinar, and over to you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Okay, Lena, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. My name is Lena Decker. I am a commercial specialist at the U.S. Consulate General in Dubai. I cover architecture, engineering, and construction, in addition to consumer goods. A good show to consider to attend in Dubai is the Big Five show. It's the biggest in the region related to construction, and it's taking place in September 2021, 12th to 15th. In addition, I'm handling also the Expo webinar that we're going to be that's gonna be held next week on Monday, and I look forward to meeting all of you again there. Thanks. Over.
Thank you very much. Rasha, over to you. Okay, sorry, Rasha, over to you.
Eric, maybe we'll come back to Russia. Would that be okay?
Sounds good. Okay, IP Pete, over to you.
Thanks, Eric.
I like that.
Hi, everyone.
I like that title,
Great.
IP Pete.
It's a good title. That's pretty good. Hey guys, my name is Pete Meraveri. I'm the U.S. government's intellectual property attaché for the Middle East and North Africa. I'm based in Kuwait normally, but right now in Abu Dhabi. Again, I cover the whole region on a range of IP issues, more on the technical side, but really for every U.S. company coming to the region, especially UAE, please let me know and we can talk about what challenges or opportunities there are for your IP protection in the region. As you might know, UAE is on the U.S. Trade Representative Special 301 list, which lists some countries where there are challenges protecting and enforcing IP. But the good news is the U.S. government is working very closely with the Emiratis to fix these issues. I'd also mention, because of the Abraham Accords, I also cover Israel, and it'll be interesting in discussing some joint Israeli-UAE IP topics. Thanks, and back to you, Eric.
Thank you so much. Okay, Peter, over to you.
Thank you. Peter Zuby here. I'm the second Pete on this phone call, which I guess would make me the repeat. Insert joke there. I'm the regional export control officer based out of the U.S. Consulate in Dubai, where I work with my colleague there, the commercial specialist Shiraz Munir, who is also on the line. If you have any questions or concerns regarding U.S. export control laws, regulations, embargoes, and sanctions, please feel free to send them our way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shiraz, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shiraz Munir. I am working for the BIS since 2010. I have worked with 3 officers until now, and Peter will be my 4th officer. We are presently doing at an average of 200 to 300 checks a year, which includes pre-license verifications and post-shipment verifications. And we personally go and meet with all type of companies, which could be a small trading company, and it could be Emirates Airlines. So it could be any company in the region. So we cover whole GCC and many other countries in the Middle East. And I'm waiting for Peter so we can start doing checks. But before he arrives, I can tell you that we are still doing checks online, on Teams, Zoom, conference call, wherever possible. We are still conducting our checks. Thank you. Over to Danny.
Thank you, Shiraz. Okay, Drew, over to you.
Greetings all. I'm Drew Peterson. I am the desk officer for the UAE, which means that I kind of play a role between bridging the field and headquarters. Some projects that I'm focused on from the headquarters standpoint right now are kind of related to data privacy issues, water and food security, and our new initiatives of coordinating on the Abraham Accords. Thanks for Danny and the council for hosting us, and thanks Thomas and Eric for help lead us here. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have afterwards. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Drew. Our coordination out at Post with Drew is really close, especially on these higher level issues, to reach back to all the resources back at Commerce headquarters on the complicated issues. Thank you so much, everybody. Really, for me, this is the highest honor to work with this team of experts out here, and they are amazing, and they're putting their back into it every day to do their best to help U.S. companies. Thank you so much. Thank you, Danny and David, and back over to you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and congratulations to you on your new position. You're on the ground now. I think you're going into your 2nd month, which is fantastic, and we really appreciate having you there. I have to say, Thomas and Eric, that I've worked with many of the folks on your team over the years, and you have a first-rate team. I think it's really helpful for our business members and our colleagues, both in the United States and the UAE, to see what you've pulled together, what you have at the array, if you will, to help American business on the ground in the UAE. Eric has provided David a chart that has everyone's name, title, and contact details that will be provided to everyone, all members of the webinar after the event, and will be on our website as well for easy access. I think you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that we have a really stellar group of folks that are dedicated to helping you all at every step of the way in your business endeavors in the United Arab Emirates. We have a couple questions from the audience, which I'll get to in a moment in the time that we have remaining. But I'm going to drill down a little bit, if I can, Thomas and Eric, and just ask you, I'm going to give you a couple hypotheticals and ask you and your team members to sort of jump in and say how you might, or what services are available to address the hypothetical situation that company X, Y, and Z might have. So the first one is brand new company coming to the UAE to possibly interest Emirati partners in its technology, in its product, possibly looking for co-investment, a UAE partner to help deploy in the United Arab Emirates and around the Gulf. What services does the U.S. Commercial Service bring to the table to help a new U.S. company entering the market for the first time? What would you advise them to do? We'll start with that one. And I know this is multifaceted, and I encourage people to just jump in and give their best advice, please. Eric, Thomas, why don't you start, please?
Eric, why don't you take a shot at this one?
Okay, thanks a lot, Thomas. Thanks for the good question, Danny. So this is kind of our bread and butter. It relates back to our export promotion pillar, and we have a whole suite of services. A lot of them are related to matchmaking, where we look at what the objectives of the U.S. company are, and we are specialists. Because of their extensive contacts, their extensive knowledge of the market, they're able to recommend potential partners, do the pre-qualification, and do the connections to introduce them to the U.S. companies. That's the short answer. Let me also involve some of our colleagues to add on to that, if I could. Ashok, if I could ask you, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure, Eric. The question Danny has asked is actually multifaceted. So it depends on the kind of reputation the brand has in the US. UAE, to my understanding, is a kind of a melting pot where people from all across the world are wanting to do business. The businesses here are very matured. They want to bring in goods and products which have already been established elsewhere. It's very difficult to bring in a company from any other country on a pilot basis unless and until they join programs such as the Dubai Future Accelerator Program, where the government, they participate with the government on a pilot, they are successful on the ground, and thereby get some interest from the local companies to maybe participate in investment co-venture. Otherwise, most of the companies I've worked with, to my understanding, with the different sectors I've covered, most of the companies are looking for established brands, and it's brands which people already know of, instead of taking risks. This is my understanding. Thanks for asking.
So that's wonderful. The U.S. Commercial Service, I think, provides something called Gold Key, if I'm not mistaken, and other services. You have services that you provide which are free of charge to American business and American companies, and then you have services that are more detailed and much more in depth in helping them with due diligence and things like that you charge for. And I know in general the U.S. Commerce Department is in a position today where it's trying to recover or recoup costs of some of its services. Can you just talk about a little bit about the array of services that are available and what's free and what you have to pay to play to get?
Sure, absolutely, Danny. I can start off to field this as well. So right now, given the COVID situation, we're offering a lot of our standard services for free. So there's a window of opportunity before the end of this fiscal year, before the end of this month, to actually work with your local U.S. Export Assistance Center who we can introduce you to book free services, which you can utilize even next fiscal year. So now is the time to act if you're interested to use a service. Normally, most of what we call our services are cost recovery basis, and that's through the mandate from Congress. We're, I think, the only federal agency which is actually mandated to do cost recovery for the labor, mainly the labor costs from our specialists. So Gold Key Service, GKS for matchmaking, SCP for single company promotion, ICP for international company profile, IPS for international partner search. So really we do matchmaking, due diligence, promotion, and also we can customize a service to meet your needs. That's the short answer. Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Eric. And I have to emphasize that doing due diligence for a new company coming to the market, doing their due diligence is probably the most important thing that can occur when you, and thinking about a potential new partner, thinking about an investment partner, very, very important to do your due diligence. And the U.S. Commercial Service can take you a significant step of the way in that process and help recommend others like reputable law firms in the marketplace that can also help you with important services. Thomas,
so, Danny, can I just jump in and add one thing for 15 seconds? Please. Just to add on to what Eric said about the cost recovery piece. This is congressionally mandated because as a government agency, we can't give any special benefit to U.S. companies. So no other agency can actually deliver these services except for us because of this mandate. And when you asked about the difference between what is free normally and what is on a cost recovery basis, counseling is free. So any company can reach out to us and have a conversation about the market and regulations and what are the keys to doing business here. We can have conversations with companies, and we do every day on a regular basis, that are not cost recovery services. But when we're asked then to either find a partner, do due diligence, do a promotional event, do market research, then that type of business development work takes a lot more time. And we can't do that for an individual company by law unless it is we are recovering those costs. And that's basically for equity reasons. If we do it for one, why wouldn't we do it for another? By building in cost recovery fee, we're automatically building in that equity. So what Eric mentioned about being able to do that now, quote unquote, for free, I think is an opportunity. Obviously, I'll put one caveat, and Eric knows this well, that given the limited resources that we have, because of the high demand, frankly, of doing business in the UAE, sometimes the timelines to deliver those services will be pushed, to the right a little bit. Over.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I was going to then ask, how do you partner with UAE government authorities in some of your work in this regard? And in particular, I think we have reps from the UAE Embassy and the UAE Commercial Mission in the U.S. on the call. How do you partner with them? How do you sort of bring end-to-end full suite of service utilizing your partners in the UAE government in helping advise American companies?
So obviously, one of the big benefits of our position in the U.S. Embassy as a government official is that we have access to UAE government officials, and we meet with them and develop relationships with them. So on the one hand, on the commercial diplomacy side that Eric was talking about, we work with them to try to improve the business environment for U.S. companies or try to resolve case-by-case issues that U.S. companies might be having to either import their products into the UAE or broader issues that companies may be having, such as intellectual property that Pete mentioned earlier. Standards is also an issue that we're tracking, as well as payment issues. I mean, let's be honest, that is sometimes an issue in the UAE and in the broader Gulf. And that's something we try to address. We can't lobby specifically for individual companies, but we can have discussions with the UAE government and ask for a fair and timely resolution to payment issues, because we don't think it's in the interest of our bilateral relationship to have them be left unresolved. It's harder to promote those markets when that's the case. I'll just note, and maybe Drew can speak to this if he so chooses. The Department of Commerce is very interested in also working on policy-oriented issues such as data privacy, data protection, which are very big issues today. A lot of our economy in the United States is digital, and we want to make sure that cross-border data flows are free. Obviously, privacy is protected so that there can be innovation that happens. And I think given the UAE's mission to go from an oil-based economy to a knowledge-based economy, it's critical that that data privacy framework be aligned with ours in the United States. So that's just one issue. IP is another issue. I think someone talked about, food security and healthcare coming out of the COVID crisis. Those are also sectors that I think the regulations and the marketplace need to be aligned so that U.S. companies have an opportunity to compete. We want to level the playing field because we think that on a level playing field, American companies will win most of the time. So that's also our objective. Over.
Thanks very much, Thomas. You did raise data protection and you did raise IP. Those were two issues. I mean, increasingly, those are the sort companies that have those kinds of concerns are ones that are wanting to enter the UAE marketplace. And I guess I'd ask IP Pete to say a word or two about. You obviously, Pete, you obviously have watched countries around the world with regard to protecting IP. Are we at a place with the UAE where we're in trouble, or are we at a place where there's a good, healthy dialogue going on and the Emiratis understand the importance of protecting IP for the future? I mean, I'm trying to get to giving American companies a level of confidence on this issue as they think about entering the marketplace.
Thanks, Danny. That's a great question. Something that our companies are really tracking as they enter the marketplace. I think a lot of it has to do with, especially in the high tech area, pharmaceuticals and brand protection. Whereas a few years ago, it was a bigger challenge. But as Danny mentioned, we are seeing an uptick in the really appreciation by the Emirati government that this is a critical area to improve on in order to attract business. Right now, there are some challenges, but there are ways that we can help mitigate those concerns. So as you're entering the market, please come to myself early on. Often than not, sometimes I get calls at 2 o'clock in the morning when a problem does happen. So I'd rather work a way around those big solutions before problems happen. So high tech, energy, food sector, all of these sectors have IP issues, but they're all ways to make the opportunities work. Back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you very, very much. Back to exports a little bit. One of the questions from the audience that I'll just throw out regards defense and defense with regards in regard to the requirement to have offsets. And I know that some of this is not necessarily in Commerce's lane because it's defense issues. But from the commercial aspect of things, is there anything new with regard to the offsets issue that companies should know about? Any new developments? Any new policy that you guys can speak to the audience about? Thomas, Eric, Pete on exports. Pete Zuby.
Thomas, do you want to start off with that, and then maybe we can get something from George?
George, why don't you start off?
Yes, Danny. So in 2019, there were some changes in the policy that by the UAE government were meant to make the flexible, more doable for foreign companies. And they opened more sectors for companies to fulfill their offset obligations. However, it's still a challenge for many foreign companies as well as American companies. But at the same time, it could be seen as an opportunity for companies that can come and establish here and help Emiratis achieve their goal of developing their manufacturing capabilities. What we can do as an office is help American companies meet local companies who could form successful joint ventures to fulfill their offset obligations. And today we had a call with one of the large companies with the very large offset obligation, and they were very grateful for the support they got from our office, through which they met with a local company and they developed a joint venture that meets the standards of Tawazun, the requirements of the offset, as well as fulfill their offset obligations and strengthen their position in the market here. Over.
Yeah, I would just add, George, I think there are a couple of developments that have happened that I can't speak to in detail, but I think that are worth noting. Number one, the establishment of EDGE, sort of the local defense industrial company that is trying to basically create a more innovative defense industry and attract investment into the United Arab Emirates in that industry, and that's something that we're definitely tracking and is of note. And then two, I think in terms of Tawazun, decision making on specific projects, I think has shifted a bit from GHQ to Tawazun, and so there's been a bit of a change there. George, I don't know if you can speak a little bit more to that, but that's something also that's relatively new. In a broader sense, I think when we look at these, we talk a lot about the diversification of the UAE economy, but the big sectors remain in Abu Dhabi, defense and energy, and the number of companies that are here that we work with, and on a regular basis, many of them are on the defense side. And I would just reiterate what George said. It's so key and important, especially in that sector, as in a lot of sectors, to have good local contacts and partners that you can rely on. Over.
Thanks very much, Thomas. We have 2 or 3 other questions here I'd like to use the remaining time to address and then give you a few minutes to wrap up, of course. One is from one of our key members who's with regard to the airlines and the hospitality sector. And it centers, it's around the area of the Abrahamic Accords. As we all know, the UAE and Israeli delegations are going to travel to Washington next week and reportedly sign the accord on the 15th at the White House in Washington, D.C. And folks are asking, another colleague who's spent a lot of time in the Middle East for the last decade is asking the question of the timeline for business, the timeline for tourism opportunities to move forward. And to the extent that you, Thomas, and your team can say a few more words about what you think the timeline is for this, I think it would be helpful to give folks a perspective. Obviously, we saw the press that an Israeli pajama company was in Dubai filming an ad in the last 3 days, and an Israeli shoe company has announced that they're opening 4 outlets in the UAE to sell their shoes. So business isn't waiting for the superstructure of diplomacy, embassies, visas, and everything to get necessarily established. It's moving very, very quickly. But what are your thoughts on the timeline here for how fast things will move, and maybe what some of the opportunities are?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jenny, for that question. I think it's going to move very fast. It's very interesting that you mentioned those 2 cases of shoes and pajama commercials. There was actually a visit from a very high-level CEO from the banking sector. I believe it was yesterday in Dubai and today in Abu Dhabi. I'm forgetting the name of the bank, but maybe the 2 top banks that were here. One of the critical sectors, I think, is banking, is to be able to get those connections made so that business can flow. If the money flows, business will flow after it. A second sector, I think, is healthcare. Given the focus of COVID and everyone dealing with that, the collaboration around the healthcare industry is a natural fit, and that's something that I think people will. That's something that we're seeing even at the government level. There's strong interest in in developing. Just on the timeline briefly, I think you're going to see, it was an announcement in the press today about ABZ actually going to the U.S. for an official ceremony to commemorate the normalization of relations. There's also talk in the press, there was a Reuters story unconfirmed about a flight from the UAE to Israel at the end of September. And so what I mentioned earlier about last week's visit, that was the first flight from Israel to the UAE, where we had those meetings in different working groups, which included investment, finance, healthcare, and others. So I guess in a nutshell, Danny, I think it's going to move very fast. And I think there is a lot of interest, especially in technology. Both countries are interested in innovation, but their markets are relatively small. So what can they do together in terms of joint development, and then maybe exporting outside to larger markets? Everything is we'll see what's going to happen, but there's a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of in our discussions, and then maybe Pete can speak to this with our Israeli counterparts and colleagues from the U.S. government that's there. There's a lot of excitement about Israelis coming to the UAE. One final mention, obviously, is the Israeli boycott. There was an announcement that the 1972 decree, which was an Israeli boycott from the UAE, was abolished. We haven't seen the final legislation on this, but that will open the doors not only to partnerships between Israeli and UAE firms, but will also, I think, reduce some irritants of contract language that have been, in contracts from UAE entities with U.S. companies that require then reporting to Commerce and Treasury. And perhaps Peter Zuby can speak a little bit to that. That's going to be a longer-term process to make sure the application of taking that contract language out is done throughout the UAE, but that's something else that we're watching. Over.
Peter Zuby, do you want to comment at all?
Yes, thank you. And to reiterate Thomas's point, we are still waiting for implementing regulation and legislation out there in the UAE, as well as what may follow in the United States with respect to both the Department of Treasury's regulations, the IRS concerns relating to officially named boycotting countries. Whether or not the UAE will come off of that list remains to be seen still. And then also on the commerce side of the house, in the Bureau of Industry and Security regulations concerning restrictive trade practices. And so you still may see such prohibited and reportable language in contracts and bids and so forth that will remain. So the need for compliance, especially with respect to U.S. laws and regulations, will continue.
Thank you. I'm going to make a comment or two on the business aspect of the Abraham Accords. I'm having my third call this morning with a Israeli minister. That discussion has now been going on for about 3 weeks. I've had a number of video calls and conference calls with a number of senior UAE officials over the last 3 weeks on some of the business aspects of this. And I would say Thomas mentioned two verticals. He mentioned healthcare and he mentioned tech. Energy and defense are the other two that I think the verticals that are going to have the most attention immediately. Obviously, tourism and the airlines, because they're going to have to be the connective tissue to all this. But a point that I've been making in all of my discussions is that both in Herzliya, the major American tech companies, whether it's Google or Microsoft, have significant facilities. The same in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. The major American tech companies, whether it's, again, Google, IBM, or Microsoft, have major facilities. These American companies already have the connective tissue to bring Israel and the UAE together at warp speed in these verticals. The defense cooperation, as we all know, has been going on quietly for many, many years. The energy cooperation is really about to pop. And with regard to life sciences and pharmaceuticals, the Lillys, the Pfizers of the world, they're all deeply engaged in Israel and deeply engaged in the UAE, and they are ready to bring the two together to find the joint opportunities for the broader region and the globe, quite frankly, where collaboration between their two sets of operations already in these companies is going to make a big promise. So I've been asking folks to just as early wins to focus on some of that. And then obviously all of the smaller SMEs and companies that support these big global brands are also at play for more business going forward. Thomas, you mentioned the finance, and that's another area where I have gotten a lot of calls from Israelis with basic questions about the UAE's financial and money and monetary policies. And I think there's a little bit of lacking of understanding on both sides there. And I think once they have a more common understanding that sector is also going to move very, very quickly, because that's going to be the grease that makes it all go round at the end of the day is the money. So that's just my 2 cents on that aspect of what's going on from what I've been working on in the last number of weeks for people to think about and consider. But I think there's amazing opportunity there. I think the UAE team the U.S. team and the embassy in Abu Dhabi and the consulate in Dubai are incredibly well positioned with their close contacts with American companies in the UAE to be part of the connective tissue here that builds the new relationship with Israel. So my hat's off to you, Thomas, and your team for all the hard work that's ahead of you in this important endeavor. And with that, I think I've covered all the questions. We have 4 minutes left. I'm going to turn it over to you, Thomas, and to Eric for concluding remarks. Thank you so much for all of your help, and to your team members. Again, I can't thank you for the close collaboration and partnership we've had over the years. Much, much appreciated.
Eric, why don't you say a couple words and then I'll close us out.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Danny, David, thank you again so much. And just another a round of thanks for all of you who joined the webinar this evening. Thank you so much. Well over 100. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of our experts and specialists and the Pete's. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks, of course, to the U.S.-UAE Business Council and Danny in particular for their amazing support. One of our strongest partners, and really looking forward to having Danny be able to come back here to the UAE sometime soon. I just want to end on one point that I didn't mention at the outset that I think is critical for all the companies on the line. One of the things about this market is that it's far away, and once things start opening back up and people do decide to come and check out the market, it's a major investment, especially for small and medium-sized firms. Well, one of the nice things about how we're structured here in the Gulf is that we do work regionally. As you saw, we have our regional officers, Pete and Repeat, and then we also have colleagues in other markets, in Doha, in Kuwait City, in Oman, in Saudi Arabia. And so if you do decide to come out here, please know that we coordinate and work together. And if we can save you time and resources by allowing you to come here, but also check out some other markets as well, we are more than happy to do that. And we want to make sure that you get as much bang for your buck. So with that, thank you again for this great opportunity, and please do reach out to us. We take pride in the results that we accomplish, and we're rated based on your success. So let us know how we can support you.
Thomas, Eric, everyone on the team, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening in the UAE and the Middle East, and to friends in the United States, have a wonderful day here. Thanks so much, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.